I've decided to start a new life without you. Those 9 words shattered 28 years of marriage in front of 50 people at my daughter's graduation dinner. My husband Richard stood there with his champagne glass raised, turning what should have been a toast to our daughter's achievements into his grand exit announcement. My name is Victoria Hartwell. I'm 54 years old, and the moment my husband tried to humiliate me in that upscale restaurant, he had no idea I'd been 3 steps ahead of him for the past 4 months. Let me take you back to that moment. The clinking of silverware stopped. Conversations died mid-sentence. Everyone stared at me, waiting for the tears, the screaming, the breakdown Richard clearly expected. Instead, I smiled. "Congratulations on your honesty," I said calmly. You should have seen his face. Confusion flickered across his features because this wasn't the script he'd written in his head. He'd planned this moment for weeks, choosing the most public setting possible to make me look weak, to make me the pitiable abandoned wife while he rode off into the sunset with his younger girlfriend. But I wasn't playing his game anymore. From the corner of my eye, I could see her. Natalie Parker, Richard's 37-year-old girlfriend, sitting at a back table with people I'd considered friends for decades. The same friends who'd known about the affair but never bothered to tell me. The same Natalie who'd attended our holiday parties, who'd once asked me for career advice. The betrayal wasn't just Richard's. It was layered, deep involving people I'd trusted. My daughter Emma sat beside me, her graduation cap still perched on her head, her face frozen in absolute horror. She had no idea this was coming. None of them did, except me. With practiced calm, I reached into my handbag and pulled out a sealed cream-colored envelope. I placed it gently beside Richard's plate. "What's this?" he asked, his triumphant expression starting to crack. "Something for you to read later," I replied, keeping my voice steady. I turned to Emma, whose eyes were filling with tears. I kissed her cheek softly. "I am so proud of you, sweetheart. This day is still about your accomplishment. Nothing changes that." Then I stood, smoothed down my dress, and addressed the room full of stunned guests. "Please enjoy your meal. I wish you all a lovely afternoon." And with that I walked out. Head high, shoulders back. 50 pairs of eyes followed me as the heavy restaurant door swung shut behind me, cutting off the anxious murmurs that had just begun. Outside, the summer heat hit me like a wall, but I welcomed it. For the first time in years, I could actually breathe. Behind me, I heard the door burst open and slam shut. Richard's voice, no longer confident but high-pitched and panicked, called out, "Victoria! What the hell is this? What have you done?" I kept walking, allowing myself a small smile. The envelope I'd handed him contained the beginning of my revenge, one I'd been meticulously planning for 4 months. And Richard? He was about to discover that underestimating me was the biggest mistake of his life. You see, I'd always been the practical one in our marriage. While Richard dreamed big and took wild risks, I was the one who maintained stability. I was the one who saved for Emma's college fund when Richard invested our money in his buddy's failed restaurant venture. I was the one who worked extra hours as a senior finance manager when his midlife crisis made him quit his stable job to follow his passion and sell handmade furniture. A passion that lasted exactly 6 months before he got bored. My own dreams of opening a financial consultancy for women? Always on hold. After Emma graduates, I told myself. After Richard finds stability. But 3 months before that graduation dinner, I noticed something. Small discrepancies in our joint accounts. Transfers to an account I didn't recognize. Having spent 25 years managing our family finances, these irregularities stood out like blood on snow. I could have confronted Richard immediately. But something held me back. Maybe it was intuition. Maybe it was the growing distance between us over the past year. Whatever it was, I chose to investigate quietly. What I discovered was worse than I'd imagined. Richard had been systematically moving funds to a separate account for over a year. He'd been taking Natalie to expensive restaurants, buying jewelry, looking at beachfront property, all while telling me we needed to tighten our belts for retirement. Then came the text messages. I found them when Richard left his phone unlocked one Saturday morning. Messages about their new life together. Messages about how he was finally breaking free. Messages planning the exact day he'd leave me. The day after Emma's graduation. He'd planned this for months. Every detail, including the public humiliation. What Richard forgot, or maybe never truly understood, was that I'd been a financial professional for 30 years. I knew how to trace assets. I understood money trails. And most importantly, I remembered the prenuptial agreement we'd signed 28 years ago. The agreement Richard had insisted on, ironically, to protect his future earnings. It contained a clause he'd completely forgotten about. A fidelity clause that would prove to be his undoing. While Richard plotted his grand escape with Natalie, I was building my case. I consulted attorneys. I documented every hidden transfer. I gathered evidence of the affair. I prepared divorce papers with surgical precision, and I timed everything perfectly. Richard wanted to wait until after Emma's graduation to avoid ruining her big day. How thoughtful. What he didn't expect was that I'd serve him divorce papers the morning of the graduation, hours before his planned announcement. The envelope I'd left on his plate? It was just the appetizer. The main course was waiting for him at home. I didn't return to the restaurant. Instead, I drove to our home, a beautiful colonial in the historic district that we'd purchased 15 years ago with money from my inheritance. The house Richard had already promised to Natalie, according to text messages he didn't know I'd seen. I parked in the driveway and calmly walked into what had been our shared space for over a decade. Everything looked the same. Family photos on the walls, my father's antique grandfather clock in the hallway, the worn leather couch where Richard and I once dreamed about our future together. But everything had changed. I went upstairs to the master bedroom and opened the closet. Richard's clothes were already packed in suitcases, hidden in the back corner, ready for his planned departure the next day. I smiled at his predictability. Always meticulous about his appearance, always careless about the things that actually mattered. My phone buzzed constantly. Messages from friends at the restaurant. From Emma, even from Richard's sister Patricia, who'd flown in for the graduation. I only responded to Emma. I'm okay. This isn't your burden to carry. Enjoy your graduation day. We'll talk tonight. I love you. I'd protected Emma from the truth for months, not wanting to overshadow her final semester with family drama. She'd be angry I hadn't told her, but she'd understand eventually. Emma inherited my practicality along with her father's charisma, a powerful combination that helped her graduate with honors. 3 hours later, I heard Richard's car screech into the driveway. The front door slammed open. "Victoria!" he shouted, his voice echoing through the house. "Where are you?" I was sitting in the living room, calmly reviewing documents on my laptop. I closed it as he stormed in, his face flushed with rage, the envelope clutched in his hand. "What is the meaning of this?" he demanded, waving the papers. "You served me with divorce papers today? Of all days?" "I thought it aligned nicely with your plans," I replied calmly. "You wanted to start your new life. I'm simply helping facilitate the transition." "The prenup expired years ago," he said, his voice suddenly smug. "Any lawyer will tell you that." I allowed myself a small smile. "Actually, it didn't. Section 12 specifically states that the fidelity clause remains in effect for the duration of the marriage. Your lawyer should have explained that to you." "Oh, wait, you didn't consult one, did you?" The color drained from his face as reality began to sink in. The prenup he'd insisted on to protect his potential wealth would now cost him everything. The house, the vacation property, his portion of our retirement accounts. His grand gesture at the restaurant had just become the most expensive announcement of his life. "You can't do this to me," Richard said, collapsing onto the couch. "We built this life together," I replied, "and you chose to end it. Just not in the way you planned." Richard's phone buzzed persistently. He glanced at it, then ignored it. Natalie, no doubt, wondering where he was and why he wasn't following their carefully orchestrated plan. "You've always been calculating, Victoria," he said, trying a different approach. But this is cold. What about our history? 28 years together means nothing? I studied him. This man I'd loved for nearly 3 decades. The man who held my hand through 2 miscarriages before we had Emma. The man who once surprised me with a weekend trip to Savannah for our 10th anniversary. When had he changed? Or had he always been this person, and I'd been too devoted to notice? Our history meant everything to me, I answered truthfully. That's why your betrayal hurt so deeply. His expression softened momentarily, perhaps seeing an opening. Then maybe we can fix this. I made a mistake. People make mistakes. This wasn't a mistake, Richard. This was a calculated plan spanning more than a year. You systematically moved our money. You looked at property with her. You planned to announce our separation publicly to humiliate me. You're exaggerating, he said. Am I? I picked up my phone, opened the recording app, and played his own voice back to him. After the graduation, I'll tell her it's over. A public setting is better. She won't make a scene in front of everyone. Then Natalie's voice. And she has no idea about the money? Richard again. None. Victoria trusts me completely. That's her weakness. The blood drained from his face completely. You recorded our conversations? That's illegal. Not in our state when one party consents, I responded. And not when it's in your own home. I didn't record your private moments with Natalie. I'm not cruel. Just the conversations about your plans to defraud me. Richard stood suddenly agitated. I need to make some calls. Of course, I said. Your attorney might be a good start. I'll be staying at Patricia's tonight. Patricia's? He sputtered. My sister's house? I nodded. She's quite upset with you, actually. She spotted you and Natalie together last Christmas. She didn't tell me immediately. She confronted you first. You promised her it was nothing, that you'd end it. When she realized you hadn't, she came to me. This was another blow he hadn't anticipated. Patricia and I had always been close, but Richard never imagined his own sister would choose my side. Everyone's betraying me, he muttered. Ironic, isn't it? I gathered my purse and the overnight bag I'd packed earlier. You have until tomorrow evening to remove your things from the house. After that, the locks will be changed. As I headed toward the door, Richard called after me, desperation breaking through. What about Emma? Have you thought about how this affects her? I paused, anger finally cracking through my calm facade. Don't you dare use our daughter as a shield, Richard. You certainly weren't thinking about her when you were planning your beachfront life with Natalie. His phone buzzed again. This time he looked at it and groaned. Problem? I asked. Natalie's at the apartment already. She moved her things in. I couldn't help but smile. The apartment you put in both your names? The lease you signed last month? Richard nodded, looking confused. You might want to check with the leasing office. That application was flagged for credit issues and never actually completed. The agent called our home phone to verify information. I handled it myself. I walked out the door, leaving Richard to face the first of many consequences. His perfectly planned new life was unraveling faster than he could process, and I was just getting started. Patricia lived in a charming house across town, close to the university where she taught literature. When I arrived, she greeted me with a fierce hug. I just heard from Emma, she said, pulling me inside. Are you okay? I'm better than I expected, I admitted, following her to the kitchen where wine was already open. I never thought Richard would make such a spectacle, Patricia said, pouring 2 glasses. The restaurant in front of everyone. He's lost his mind. It was meant to humiliate me, I explained. A public rejection, so I couldn't fight back without looking hysterical. Patricia's face darkened. My brother always had a flair for drama, but this is beyond anything I expected. We settled in her sunroom, surrounded by plants and bookshelves. Patricia had never married, preferring her independence and academic pursuits. Over the years, I'd sometimes envied her freedom. What did you put in that envelope that made him so upset? She asked. I explained everything. The divorce filing, the evidence of financial deception, and most importantly, the prenuptial agreement that would leave him with far less than he'd planned. The prenup, Patricia laughed. I remember when he insisted on it. Father had just given you that inheritance money, and Richard was so worried about protecting his future earnings. She laughed bitterly. The irony is delicious. My phone rang. Emma. I took a deep breath before answering. Mom, she said immediately, her voice strained. I'm coming over to Aunt Patricia's. Honey, you don't have to. I'm already on my way, she interrupted. Dad's telling everyone you've lost your mind, that you've been planning this for months. He's saying horrible things. Of course he was. Richard always rewrote narratives to cast himself as the victim. Let him talk, I said. The truth will become clear soon enough. 20 minutes later, Emma arrived, still in her graduation dress, but with makeup smudged from crying. She fell into my arms like she used to as a child after a nightmare. Why didn't you tell me? She asked, her voice muffled against my shoulder. I didn't want to ruin your final semester, I explained. You worked so hard for this day, she pulled back, wiping her eyes. Well, Dad took care of ruining it anyway. We moved to Patricia's living room, where Emma finally got the full story. How I discovered the affair. The financial deceptions. The plans Richard and Natalie had made. I knew something was off with Dad, Emma admitted. He's been different, distracted, always on his phone. But I never imagined. None of us want to see these things in people we love, Patricia said gently. My phone buzzed with a text from Michael Carson, my attorney. The emergency filing had been approved. The accounts I'd identified were frozen pending divorce proceedings. Richard now had limited access to funds. Enough for living expenses, but not enough to follow through on the property purchases he'd planned with Natalie. I showed the message to Patricia and Emma. Good, Emma said firmly. He deserves it. My daughter's loyalty warmed me, but I wasn't naive. He's still your father, I reminded her. Your relationship with him is separate from what's happening between us. Emma shook her head. Maybe someday, but right now I can't even look at him. He hugged me this morning and told me how proud he was, all while planning to blow up our family hours later. The doorbell rang, interrupting our conversation. Patricia went to answer it, returning moments later with a troubled expression. It's Richard, she said, and he's not alone. I steeled myself as Patricia led Richard and Natalie into the living room. Natalie looked uncomfortable, shifting her weight, her eyes darting around. She was 37, not exactly a trophy wife, but still 17 years younger than me, with shoulder-length blonde hair and the kind of confidence that comes from never facing real hardship. Richard, by contrast, looked furious. His earlier desperation had hardened into anger. Victoria, you need to stop this insanity, he demanded. Unfreeze the accounts. We can discuss this like reasonable adults. Emma stood up, placing herself slightly in front of me. Maybe you should have tried being reasonable before announcing to everyone that you were leaving Mom. Richard's eyes widened as if just noticing our daughter. Emma, this doesn't involve you. Doesn't involve me? She echoed incredulously. You blew up our family on my graduation day, and it doesn't involve me? Natalie touched Richard's arm. Richard, maybe we should go. He shook her off. No, I'm not leaving until Victoria agrees to be rational about this. Patricia folded her arms. My sister-in-law seems to be the only rational person in this scenario. You're the one who created this mess, Richard. I remained seated, watching the drama unfold. For years, I'd been the peacemaker, smoothing over conflicts and keeping everyone happy. That exhausting role was finally over. The accounts will remain frozen until the preliminary hearing, I said calmly. That's in 3 days. The judge will determine appropriate asset division. 3 days? Richard sputtered. What am I supposed to do for 3 days? You have your personal account, I reminded him. The one you've been funneling money into for the past year. That should be sufficient. Natalie's head whipped toward Richard. You have a separate account? With how much in it? An interesting dynamic was emerging. Clearly, Richard hadn't been entirely forthcoming with Natalie either. Richard ignored her question. This is vindictive, Victoria. This isn't like you. Perhaps you never really knew me, I replied. Just as I apparently never really knew you. Emma turned to Natalie. Did you know he was going to announce it like that? At my graduation celebration? Natalie had the decency to look ashamed. I thought, I thought he was going to talk to your mother privately. The announcement today was unexpected. Richard shot her a betrayed look. Cracks were already forming in their united front. I think you both should leave, Patricia said firmly. You've upset Emma enough for one day. Emma, Richard pleaded, you understand that relationships change, don't you? Sometimes people grow apart. My daughter's face hardened in a way I'd never seen before. What I understand is that you're a coward who couldn't even give Mom the dignity of a private conversation. What I understand is that you were stealing from our family while I was working 2 jobs to help pay for textbooks because you said money was tight. Richard paled. That's not how it was. It's exactly how it was, Emma cut him off. Please leave, Dad. I can't look at you right now. The silence that followed was deafening. Finally, Richard turned to go, Natalie trailing behind him. At the door, he paused and looked back at me. This isn't over, Victoria. I'll fight you on this. I met his gaze steadily. You're welcome to try. After they left, Emma collapsed beside me on the sofa, tears streaming. I've never talked to Dad like that. I wrapped my arm around her shoulders. Sometimes standing up for what's right is painful. Patricia brought fresh wine. To new beginnings, she said, raising her glass. Indeed, I thought. This ending was just the beginning of something new. The preliminary hearing took place in a small courtroom on a rainy Tuesday morning. I arrived with Michael, while Richard came with a lawyer he'd hastily retained, a young associate from a firm that specialized in corporate law, not family matters. Richard's poor choice of representation was yet another consequence of his rushed planning. The judge, an older woman with sharp eyes and zero patience for dramatics, reviewed the prenuptial agreement carefully. This document appears to be in order, she said, looking over her reading glasses at Richard's attorney. Do you contest its validity? The young lawyer cleared his throat nervously. Your Honor, we believe the agreement has expired due to the length of time that has passed. The judge read aloud. Section 18 clearly states that the duration is for the term of the marriage plus any legal proceedings resulting from its dissolution. There is no expiration date indicated. She shuffled through papers, then looked up. Furthermore, the evidence of systematic fund transfers appears to violate the financial disclosure requirements in Section 23. Gregory leaned forward to whisper urgently to his lawyer, who looked increasingly uncomfortable. I am ruling to maintain the freeze on joint accounts pending full financial discovery, the judge continued. Mr. Hartwell's personal account will remain accessible to him. The family home will remain in Mrs. Hartwell's possession during proceedings, as stipulated in the prenuptial agreement's infidelity clause. Richard's face flushed dark red. This is outrageous, he muttered loud enough for everyone to hear. The judge fixed him with a stern look. Mr. Hartwell, I suggest you review the agreement you signed more carefully. This court will reconvene in 30 days for the full hearing after discovery is complete. As we left the courtroom, Richard caught up to me in the hallway. Victoria, please. We need to talk about this reasonably. 28 years together has to count for something. It counted for everything, I replied, until you decided it didn't. I walked away, leaving him standing alone in the courthouse corridor, the weight of his choices finally beginning to sink in. Word spread quickly through our social circle. Friends called daily, some offering support, others seeking gossip. I maintained a dignified silence about details, simply saying, Richard and I are separating. These things happen. Meanwhile, Richard's carefully constructed facade was crumbling. The image he'd cultivated, successful businessman, devoted family man, was tarnished beyond repair. The financial freeze meant he couldn't follow through on promises made to Natalie. The beachfront property fell through. The luxury car he'd put a deposit on had to be canceled. 2 weeks after the hearing, Patricia called me, her voice tinged with amusement. Have you heard the latest? Natalie moved out. Already? I wasn't entirely surprised, but the speed was impressive. Apparently, she discovered that Richard's business isn't doing as well as he claimed. The substantial savings he talked about don't exist. She told her friend Jennifer that she didn't sign up to date a man with financial problems. I couldn't help but laugh. He always was good at creating illusions. Meanwhile, I was rebuilding. The financial security I'd always maintained, separate from our joint accounts, gave me freedom Richard hadn't anticipated. I rented a small office space downtown and began setting up the consultancy I'd dreamed about for years. My first clients were two women going through divorces of their own. Word of mouth brought more. I specialized in helping women understand their finances during major life transitions, divorces, widowhood, career changes. The work was immediately fulfilling in a way my corporate job never had been. Emma, who'd accepted a job with a marketing firm in Charleston, called regularly. "I'm so proud of you." "Mom," she told me after I described my growing client list, "you're helping people during their worst moments." "I'm just doing what I wish someone had done for me earlier," I replied. Preparing women for whatever might come. Being needed for my expertise rather than my caregiving was empowering. But then came the twist I never saw coming. 3 weeks before the final hearing, Michael called me with urgency in his voice. "Victoria, we need to meet. Today, if possible. I've discovered something." An hour later, I sat in his office as he spread documents across his desk. During discovery, we found something Richard's attorney tried to hide. A third bank account, not the joint accounts, not the personal account he's been using. A third one? My stomach dropped. "How much?" $230,000. I stared at him. "What?" It gets worse. The account was opened 7 years ago. He's been funneling money there long before Natalie came into the picture. 7 years. Before I even suspected anything. Before the affair. This wasn't just about leaving me for another woman. This was systematic, long-term financial deception. "There's more," Michael said grimly. "Some of the transfers came from your parents' estate settlement. Money that was legally yours." I felt sick. When my parents died 4 years ago, they'd left me a substantial inheritance. Richard had been so supportive during that difficult time, helping me manage the paperwork, the estate distribution. He'd been stealing from me even then. "Can we prove it?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Every transaction is documented. Your name was forged on several transfer authorizations. Victoria, this isn't just divorce fraud. This is criminal." I sat back in my chair trying to process this. The man I'd loved, the father of my child, had been robbing me for 7 years. "What do you recommend?" I asked. "We have 2 options. 1, we use this in the divorce proceedings to nullify any claim he has to assets. 2, we press criminal charges." "Both," I said firmly. "We do both," Michael smiled grimly. "I was hoping you'd say that." The final hearing was scheduled for what would have been our 29th anniversary. A fitting end to a chapter that had lasted nearly 3 decades. When we arrived at the courthouse, Richard looked haggard. I'd later learn his business was struggling without my financial support and guidance. Natalie was long gone, already dating someone else. Most of our mutual friends had distanced themselves after learning the full story. The judge entered, and we all stood. "Before we begin," Michael said, "we'd like to submit additional evidence discovered during the discovery process." He handed a thick folder to the judge. Richard's lawyer looked confused. They hadn't been given advance notice. The judge reviewed the documents, her expression growing sterner with each page. "Mr. Hartwell," she said finally, "are you aware of a bank account ending in 7743? Richard's face went white. That's a personal account." "A personal account funded partially by unauthorized transfers from your wife's inheritance? Transfers bearing what appear to be forged signatures?" His lawyer stood quickly. "Your Honor, we were not made aware of these allegations because your client failed to disclose the account during discovery," the judge interrupted. "That's a serious violation, counselor." She turned to Richard. "Mr. Hartwell, I'm not only ruling against you in this divorce proceeding, I'm also referring this matter to the district attorney's office for potential criminal charges." Richard stood up, his chair scraping loudly. "You can't do this! That money was for our future." "Sit down, Mr. Hartwell," the judge ordered. "The prenuptial agreement is upheld in its entirety. Mrs. Hartwell retains the family home, 70% of joint investments, and full rights to her inheritance. The account in question will be frozen pending criminal investigation. Richard's lawyer tried to speak, but the judge raised her hand. Furthermore, given the evidence of long-term financial deception, I'm awarding Mrs. Hartwell compensatory damages. The final settlement will include liquidation of Mr. Hartwell's business assets if necessary to satisfy the judgment. Richard collapsed into his chair. The color completely drained from his face. As we left the courtroom, he approached me one last time, his voice barely audible. I made a terrible mistake. Is there any chance we could— No, I interrupted, gentle but firm. That door's closed. I understand, he replied. And for once, I believed he did. I hope you find happiness, Victoria. You deserve it. It was perhaps the first honest thing he'd said to me in years. 6 months later, my consultancy, Hartwell Financial Transitions, was thriving. I'd moved from the small office to a larger space with windows overlooking the river. I'd hired 2 associates, both women who'd been through difficult divorces themselves. We understood our clients because we'd been our clients. We specialized in helping women secure their financial futures, particularly through major life changes, divorces, widowhood, career transitions, retirement planning. Every client who walked through our door carried a story of either betrayal, loss, or transition, and we helped them navigate it with dignity and practical support. Emma visited often, proud of what I'd built. You know what's ironic? She said during one visit, sipping coffee in my new office. If Dad had just been honest from the beginning, he might have kept half of everything. Sometimes people can't see beyond what they want in the moment, I replied. The criminal investigation into Richard's financial deception resulted in charges of fraud and forgery. He pleaded guilty to avoid trial and received 2 years probation, community service, and was ordered to pay full restitution. His business collapsed under the weight of the settlement and legal fees. The last I heard, he was working as a sales associate at a furniture store. The irony wasn't lost on me. After all those failed passion projects, he'd ended up in retail furniture anyway. Natalie, I learned through mutual acquaintances, had moved to Florida with her new boyfriend, a real estate developer. She never once reached out to apologize, which told me everything I needed to know about her character. The friends who'd known about the affair and said nothing? I let them drift away naturally. Real friends wouldn't have let me be blindsided like that, but new friendships emerged. Women I met through my consultancy. Patricia's academic colleagues. My associates became close friends. One unexpected development came from Emma. Mom, she said during a Sunday dinner at my new condo, I've been thinking about graduate school. Business administration, with a focus on financial planning. I want to join your firm eventually. My heart swelled. You don't have to do that because of me, honey. I'm not, she insisted. I'm doing it because watching you build this has inspired me. You took the worst moment of your life and turned it into something that helps people. That's what I want to do too. 2 years after the divorce, I received an unexpected letter. It was from Richard. I almost didn't open it, but curiosity won out. The letter was short. Victoria, I know I have no right to reach out. I know an apology can't undo the damage I caused. But I wanted you to know that I've been in therapy, genuinely trying to understand why I made the choices I did. My therapist helped me see that I'd been running from my own insecurities for years, and I destroyed the best thing in my life in the process. You deserved so much better than what I gave you. I'm glad you found success and happiness. You always were the stronger one. I just was too self-absorbed to see it. I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know that I finally understand what I lost. Richard. I read it twice, then filed it away in a drawer. It wasn't closure exactly, but it was acknowledgement. And somehow that was enough. 3 years after that devastating graduation dinner, I found myself standing in front of a room full of women at a financial empowerment conference. I'd been invited to speak about my journey from betrayed wife to successful entrepreneur. As I looked out at the audience, I saw faces that reflected my own story. Women who'd been blindsided. women who'd been financially controlled, women who were rebuilding. "I'm not going to tell you that divorce or betrayal is easy," I began. "It's one of the most painful experiences a person can face. But I will tell you that it doesn't define you. What defines you is what you do next." I shared my story. The public humiliation at the restaurant, the months of secret investigation, the prenup that saved me, the hidden bank accounts, the criminal charges, but I also shared the aftermath, the consultancy I built, the women I'd helped, the relationship I'd rebuilt with Emma, the life I'd reclaimed. "The envelope I handed my ex-husband that day wasn't just divorce papers," I said. "It was a declaration of independence. It was me taking back control of my narrative, my finances, my future." After my talk, women lined up to speak with me. Some wanted business advice. Others just wanted to share their stories. One woman, probably in her 60s, took my hand and said, "Thank you for showing us that it's never too late to start over." That evening, Emma and I had dinner at a restaurant overlooking the river. "You were amazing today, Mom," she said. "The standing ovation? You deserved every second of it." "I never imagined my life would turn out this way," I admitted. "For so long, I defined myself by my relationship with your father. When that ended, I thought I'd be lost." "But you weren't," Emma said. "You were found." She was right. The woman who walked out of that graduation dinner 3 years ago had been hiding behind decades of compromise and accommodation. The woman I'd become was stronger, more authentic, more purposeful. A few months later, I received news that felt like the final chapter closing. Richard had remarried. A woman closer to his age this time, someone he'd met in his therapy group. I hoped genuinely that he'd learned from his mistakes and would treat her better than he'd treated me. My life had moved so far forward that his news barely registered as a blip. I'd recently been asked to write a book about financial planning for women during life transitions. I'd also been invited to teach a Retry F Continue course at the local community college about personal finance and empowerment. Emma had enrolled in graduate school and was already talking about joining the firm after graduation. We were planning to expand, possibly open a second location. On the 3-year anniversary of that fateful graduation dinner, I did something symbolic. I threw a party. Not a big one, just Patricia, Emma, my associates from the firm, and a few close friends I'd made in this new chapter of my life. We gathered in my condo, the one with the view of the river, and I raised my glass. 3 years ago, my marriage ended in the most public, humiliating way possible. I could have crumbled. I could have let that define me as the woman who was left, who was betrayed, who was broken. I paused, looking at the faces of the women who'd supported me, who'd celebrated my victories and held me through the difficult moments. Instead, I chose to let it be the beginning of something new, something that was entirely mine. And I want to thank all of you for being part of that journey. Emma stood up, her eyes glistening with tears. "Mom, can I say something?" I nodded. "For my whole life, I watched you put everyone else first. Dad's dreams, my needs, everyone else's comfort. And I loved you for it. But I also worried about you. When Dad did what he did, I was terrified you'd break." She wiped her eyes. "But you didn't break. You bent, adjusted, and came back stronger than ever. You didn't just survive, Mom. You transformed. And you're teaching me, teaching all of us, that it's never too late to put yourself first." Patricia raised her glass. "To Victoria, the strongest woman I know." Everyone echoed the toast, and as I looked around that room, I realized something profound. Richard's betrayal hadn't destroyed me. It had freed me. For 28 years, I'd lived a half-life, always accommodating, always compromising, always putting my dreams on hold. His leaving forced me to finally ask the question I'd been avoiding: what do I want? And the answer changed everything. That night, after everyone left, I sat down at my desk and did something I'd been avoiding for 3 years. I wrote a letter to Richard. Not to send, but for myself. "Richard, you once asked if 28 years together meant nothing. The answer is complicated. Those years meant everything and nothing simultaneously. They were real while they lasted. The love, the partnership, the family we built, those things existed. but they existed within a framework of dishonesty I didn't see until it was too late. You taught me something valuable, though not what you intended. You taught me that love without honesty is an illusion. That partnership without integrity is performance. That family built on deception will eventually crumble. But you also taught me about my own strength. When you tried to humiliate me publicly, you expected me to break. Instead, you gave me permission to finally put myself first. The prenup you insisted on. The one meant to protect you? It became my shield. The financial skills you took for granted? They became my sword. The dignity you tried to strip from me in that restaurant? I walked out with it intact because I refused to play the role you'd written for me. I don't hate you anymore. Hate requires too much energy, and I'm investing that energy in building something meaningful instead. I don't forgive you either, not in the way people expect. Forgiveness doesn't mean pretending it didn't happen or that it didn't hurt. It means I've stopped letting your choices control my emotional state. What I've learned is that sometimes the worst thing that happens to us becomes the catalyst for the best thing that could happen. You leaving forced me to finally ask, who am I without you? Who am I when I stop compromising, accommodating, and shrinking myself to fit someone else's vision of who I should be? The answer surprised me. I'm stronger than I knew. I'm smarter than I gave myself credit for. I'm capable of building something from nothing. And I'm worthy of a life that isn't defined by someone else's choices. So thank you, Richard. Not for the betrayal, but for the clarity it forced upon me. I hope you've found peace with yourself. I hope you've learned from your mistakes. I hope your new marriage is built on honesty this time. As for me, I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. Building a business that matters. Helping women find their financial power. Watching my daughter become the woman I always hoped she'd be. Living a life that's authentically mine. The envelope I gave you that day wasn't just divorce papers. It was my declaration of independence. It was me reclaiming my narrative. It was me choosing myself finally, after nearly 3 decades of choosing us. And that choice? It was the best decision I ever made. Goodbye, Richard, and thank you for letting me go. Victoria. I folded the letter and placed it in a box with other mementos from that chapter of my life. The divorce papers. The prenup. Photos from happier times. Evidence of who I was and who I'd become. Then I closed the box and put it on the top shelf of my closet. Not to forget, but to acknowledge that chapter was finished. The story was moving forward without it. If you're listening to this and you're in the middle of your own betrayal, your own nightmare, your own public humiliation, let me tell you something important. You will survive this. More than that, you can thrive after this, but you have to make a choice. You can let the betrayal define you as a victim, or you can let it propel you into the person you were always meant to become. Here's what I learned through all of this. First, trust your instincts. When I noticed those financial discrepancies, I could have ignored them. But something in me knew I needed to investigate. Listen to that voice. Second, knowledge is power. The financial skills I'd developed over 30 years became my greatest asset. Invest in yourself, in your education, in skills that make you independent. You never know when you'll need them. Third, document everything. The recordings, the screenshots, the paper trail, they saved me. If something feels wrong, create a record. Protect yourself. Fourth, surround yourself with people who see your worth. Patricia, Emma, my attorney Michael, they believed in me when I was still finding my way. Find your people and hold them close. Fifth, revenge isn't about destruction. It's about justice and rebuilding. I didn't destroy Richard because I was cruel. I held him accountable because I was strong. There's a difference. And finally, the most important lesson, it's never too late to start over. At 54, I thought my life was set. My role was defined. My future was predetermined. I was wrong. The best years of my life started the day I walked out of that restaurant with my head held high. The envelope I handed Richard that day contained divorce papers. But symbolically, it contained so much more. It contained permission to be myself. Permission to prioritize my needs. Permission to build a life that was mine alone. That envelope was my revenge, yes, but more importantly, it was my rebirth. And if you're facing your own defining moment, your own public humiliation, your own devastating betrayal, I want you to know this. You are stronger than you think. You are more capable than you've been allowed to believe. And you are worthy of a life that celebrates you, not one that diminishes you. The person who betrayed you may have written the ending they wanted, but you get to write what comes next. Make it legendary. My name is Victoria Hartwell. I'm 57 years old now. I run a successful financial consultancy that's helped hundreds of women reclaim their power. My daughter is my business partner. My life is full of purpose, meaning, and authentic relationships. And it all started the day my husband tried to humiliate me in front of 50 people. And I refused to play the role he'd written for me. That's my story. That's my truth. And I'm still standing. If this story resonated with you, if it reminded you that betrayal isn't the end but can be a beginning, then share it. Let other women know they're not alone. Let them know that strength isn't about never falling. It's about getting back up with more wisdom and power than before. And if you're going through something similar, reach out. Find your support system. Document everything. Protect yourself. And never ever let someone else's choices define your worth. You are not what happened to you. You are what you choose to become after. Thank you for listening to my story. Now go write yours.